My final guest is Congressman Mike Turner from Ohio. I should say that he and I may very well be relatives from Bethet County, Kentucky, from cousins, but that's an entirely different subject. He's the ranking member of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee. Congressman Turner, it's great to see you again. Thanks. We'll keep the cousins part quiet. But let me just ask you, Mike, when it comes to this issue of are we putting in place the security and defenses that we need right now, how vulnerable do you see the United States and our allies to intercontinental ballistic missiles and other forms of missiles, hypersonic and other? What do we not have in place that we need to put in place from your view?
One of the things that we have to look to when we take the question of do we have enough or are we adequately protected is really how far we've come in the policy debate. If you'll recall at the end of the Bush administration, where the Bush administration had planned a forward deployment of a ground-based system in Poland and a radar in the Czech Republic. The Obama administration came in and canceled that, announced the phase-adapted approach, which resulted in Aegis Ashore being placed in Romania and now in Poland. The defense of the U.S. homeland was scrapped in that overall plan. At that time, as we went from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, the debate on missile defense was still, the three prongs of it was not going to work, it was provocative, and it was too expensive. Those three things were an impediment, really, to some of the advances that we needed in missile defense to be able to make our systems more effective and to expand our overall capabilities. At the same time that debate was going on, the United States entered into an agreement with Israel to help co-develop the Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, that is their really multi-layered system of defense. Mm-hmm. And what occurred in Israel as a result of the fact that they're in such a constant state of conflict is that we got to see missile defense deployed and work. And that really changed the policy debate because we saw not only is it not provocative, it's de-escalatory. It gave Israel the space to be able to make decisions to later respond as opposed to immediate response when they would have been under fire. It was not too expensive because the amount of damage that was prevented was overwhelming in comparison to the cost of missile defense. And also it worked, and it worked overwhelmingly. So the policy shift has occurred from it doesn't work, it's provocative, it costs too much, to almost a sense of it's immoral for us not to vigorously pursue missile defense because we're leaving populations, infrastructure vulnerable to the missile threat. And the missile threat has been proliferating, both in like North Korea and Iran, who are pursuing ICBM or missile technology, but also in other nations and the numbers of missiles that put the United States at risk. So we're not keeping up. We have a lot more to do, and I think it's going to, pull us into the new technology ultimately, which hopefully will be directed energy.
So let me ask you, in the world of kind of nuclear weapons and strategic logic, one of the big elements of that used to be, it was sort of the Dr. Strangelove idea of mutual assured destruction. Does this now take us out of the mutual assured destruction box? And is this one of the reasons why the Russians and Chinese are so worried about our investments in missile defense? Because then from their viewpoint, it looks like it gives America a unique form of first strike capability and a unique form of defense that combined looks very threatening to them. So I guess we used to have MAD, and people said, oh, you have stability from MAD. I'm just wondering if we're evolving out of that.
No, and really, those who advance that argument really are being disingenuous because the numbers of what we have invested in missile defense are easily overwhelmed by either of those nations and pose no real threat to the issue of deterrence. Now, we are seeing massive buildups from both those nations, not in response to missile defense, but in ways in which they're even deploying exotics where Russia is developing nuclear weapon systems that are even specifically tailored to the types of targets that they may look to that are very troubling. And, of course, China now looking to implement a triad where before they did not have full build-out of a nuclear weapons capability. But what we're seeing, though, is even, for example, Russia has a missile defense system that protects Moscow. It's very well known. We do not have similarly deployed for Washington, D.C. And so then it begs the question of, well, if Moscow is protecting itself, why aren't we not protecting the citizens and certainly the seat of our national capital? And that's how the future debate goes. At this point, we're no threat to any of our adversaries in tipping that scale on deterrence. But we do need to be looking to what types of technologies, what type of investments do we have to make so in the future we lessen the threat to both our nation and our populations.
Mike, one of the things we've been discussing today are next generation interceptors, which I understand is the next step forward in missile defense that would replace a lot of our northern, focused over the horizon ground-based missile defense systems. Do you support that? Where are we in terms of funding it? Is there a security gap between the time now and when that's deployed?
Well, there certainly is a concern. The Missile Defense Agency stumbled. They were redesigning the kill vehicle that would go into the missiles that we currently have in Alaska and California that are largely focused on the issue of the threat of North Korea. We have on the books, approved by Congress, an East Coast missile defense site that would go at Fort Drum that would be an expansion depending upon how the threat from Iran evolves. This is essential because the new kill vehicle, which is now being redesigned again, would be both more accurate, more reliable, and also be able to respond to some of the things that we see that are progressing in our adversaries' technology. The aspect of this I think that's most important is a recognition that missile defense is important, it works, and we need to make certain that we continue that investment to protect our country.
Mike, how organized are we in terms of looking at the security dimensions of space right now? I know there are a lot of commercial players moving into space. I see Elon Musk every day on Twitter doing something with regards to SpaceX and Richard Branson. But that may not fit the kind of definition of how we're going to both protect ourselves in space, but also look at space as a new arena where security is obviously part of that. How much is that space dimension becoming part of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee work you're doing?
Well, it's absolutely essential. I mean, first off, it's the integral foundation to almost every operation or aspects of operating for our military service branches. In addition, it is the way we see, it is the way we assess the threat. And certainly for missile defense, it is both our understanding of if we are at risk, if someone is attacking us, but also then how do we approach trying to neutralize that target. We're working diligently to both strengthen our space assets, respond to what our adversaries are doing. It's been widely publicized that Russia and China have both tested systems that would attack satellites and would destroy them. We need to make certain that we can sustain our space capabilities. That, of course, was the impetus for the birth of Space Force, the new service branch. And General Raymond's doing an excellent job of doing a real quick and dirty assessment of what do we need to do right now and what do we need to do for the future.
Let me ask you one. I've got two more questions for you, Congressman. But I love this conversation. I love that we get to talk about this now, and instead of other stuff as we have in the past. But I think that one of the things that intrigues me is the question of arms control. Remember, Ronald Reagan negotiated big arms control deals, and really, the circumstances that led to what led to the demise in a way of the Soviet Union. But when you kind of look at arms control and the players we have out there now with Vladimir Putin in Russia, Xi Jinping in China as big players in this, but there are others, of course. Is there still a place for negotiated arms control in these areas of strategic defense and strategic offensive systems? Do you believe in that, or is that folly at this moment, given some of the challenges we're facing?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things that have happened that certainly make it more difficult. One, the obvious violations that we have of treaties by Russia. The INF treaty died as a result of the fact that Russia was violating the treaty, all the way up to deploying a non-compliant missile system. Secondly, you have the rise of China and the fact that they are vastly expanding their capabilities and are not subject to any arms control agreement, nor have they indicated an interest in doing so. And thirdly, you've got Russia deploying these exotics, Skyfall, this nuclear-powered missile that can orbit the Earth, Poseidon, that is basically an unmanned submarine that pops up out on the coast and then attacks a city, and then others, some of which are of course classified as we're reviewing what Russia's intent is. We're seeing that they're continuing to invest in developing new weapons. All of those things make negotiations more difficult. But what's happening on Capitol Hill, which I think is incredibly important, is that there's a doubling down of people understanding that we need to modernize our nuclear weapons and our nuclear weapons production systems. Because no one is going to enter into an arms control agreement with us if we do not even have the ability to produce nuclear weapons. We don't have the ability to modernize and field nuclear weapons. They will just allow us to continue down our path of decline and decay. That, I think, is taking hold here among all of those who are, who want to see a decline in the dependence on nuclear weapons. Understand that we still need the infrastructure, we still need the capabilities, or no one's going to think that we're important enough even to negotiate with.
Let me just ask you finally, Mike, one of the things that I think I'm going to get a lot of emails and tweets right now from friends of mine who say I've got it all wrong. But I've spent a lot of time looking at the defense budget in the past. And, some of the systems we're talking about are very expensive pieces of it, but they pale in comparison to the costs of maintaining a large human military force, the benefits that go with that, the long-term benefits we give for people who are willing to put themselves on the line to sacrifice for this country, but many people who are in the reserve who've joined. That infrastructure of human costs, in a way, crowds out what's there to invest in R&D, in next-generation weapon systems that may be less people-dependent. Is there any serious talk going on in national security circles up on the Hill about how to get those in balance? Because if you look at where the real pressures are, they're not, in my view, they're not just coming from next generation nuclear weapons. It's coming from a lot of other ongoing obligations which the Pentagon is going to have for generations after today.
Steve, well, you are absolutely right. And what we don't want to do is cannibalize our capabilities to modernize or cannibalize our conventional capabilities. What we've gone through with Iraq and Afghanistan, a period of time where modernization was put on hold. Then we had sequestration, where even our general readiness of our conventional forces was at risk. During those two periods, our adversaries, main adversaries, China and Russia, spent a significant amount of time designing modernization programs and putting them into place so that now we see our adversaries almost jumping ahead in front of us in a number of ways. So if we just return back to the modernization path that we were on, we're going to modernize into second and third place. So we have to leapfrog. We have to look at new technologies, new capabilities. And you are absolutely right. That means that that's going to take additional resources. Now, as we know, our nuclear weapons and those are, in our adversaries' hands have done their job, as many will say, every day, and that they've kept the peace, because there is that, as you've described before, the deterrence of holding everyone at bay so we don't have major power conflict. But the other aspect of this that's important is that as we look to the future, as we look to the rogue states, that's where missile defense comes into a real important area. It's not just the deterrence factor, but it's also how can we make certain that they're not capable enough to be able to hurt America and hurt our country.
Well, Congressman Mike Turner, ranking member of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, really knowledgeable on this. One of the most, I don't want to get you in trouble, but in my book, one of the most bipartisan people out there. We've talked about your district before, and we still have that Kentucky connection we have to sort out. But
that's right.
Yeah, Mike Turner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
That brings us to the end of our program. A really big thank you to Raytheon Missiles and Defense for its support, and to all of you attendees for joining us for these set of discussions. For any of you who have missed these conversations, we'll have the video from the event up on our website shortly. I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.